Gunshots burst into the air, disturbing the sleeping residents of the small eastern town. Frosty winds ripped at Quentin Mallard's bones, sucking the air from his lungs and forcing him to wheeze. He could feel the warm blood dripping from his hand, lacing the soft snow that blanketed the streets. The gunshot wound in his stomach caused him to stagger into the back alley, which was even more unforgiving. The concrete held patches of ice that were hard to spot underneath the buildup of snow. He could hear them as they were quickly gaining on him. He knew his past would come back to haunt him. All those years of running like a fugitive had left a sour taste in his mouth. But now he was ending this, and one way or another, Quentin Mallard would finally be at peace. He slouched himself against the brick building that was heavily covered with graffiti. He continued to gasp and wheeze as his mind wandered back to a much different time. The front door slammed shut, running as fast as he could, his pounding heart echoing in his ears. The cool wind whipping across his face felt refreshing. Eventually he stopped to catch his breath. He watched the steady stream of people coming and going. "You're on my turf!" a voice shouted. Quentin jumped up suddenly, his hands balled into fists, ready to fight anyone who tried forcing him back to that hellhole. When he saw a young man who couldn't have been more than 16, he relaxed a bit, unballing his fist. The teenager's brown hair was wavy and disheveled. He had dark brown eyes that stared menacingly back at Quentin. "I don't see your name on it," Quentin said. "You're in the wrong neighborhood to be a smartass. Where'd you come from?" "Ran away from my foster home. Not going back." "You want to run with me?" "Who are you?" He laughed a little, obviously amused with mistrust. "I'm Tony Garza, Quentin Mallard." The two slapped hands, and from then on, Quentin followed Tony wherever. Later, Tony had coaxed him into stealing, not because they needed to, but because of the pure enjoyment of it. The first time he had stolen had been exhilarating. It had led to a life of crime. Now he was a 32-year-old man who was in too deep. Quentin collapsed to his knees just as the gang of criminals caught up to him. Tony halted the gang, brushing away a few strands of his long brown hair. Beads of sweat trickled down his face as he walked closer to Quentin. "I didn't want it to have to come to this, man. You left me no choice," said Tony, holding a pistol just inches away from Quentin's head. "Killing me changes nothing. You'll never find the money," said Quentin. "Maybe not. Maybe this was never about the money." "What are you talking about?" "Face it, Quentin. You were never cut out for this line of work. We all knew you'd try to get out. Thought you could betray me? I gave your worthless hide everything," shouted Tony. "I might have lied to you, stolen the money, but I never ratted your guys out to the cops. It doesn't matter anymore," he said through clenched teeth. Quentin stared at the face of the man he had once considered a friend. Twisted with pain and rage, Quentin could sense a war deep inside of Tony. "You'll regret this, Tony," warned Quentin. Tony said nothing. He was trying to keep his tough guy composure, which was slowly ripping at the seams. As the gun shook violently in his hand, before both of them realized it, a single gunshot had torn through the bitter air. In a twist of strange fate, Tony became the one on his knees. He fell face first into the snow, the pristine snow turning into a crimson red. The bullet had lodged into his head. Quentin could only stare at the corpse of his friend in utter shock. Then, as if something had finally jolted his fight or flight response, Quentin's gaze darted toward the other gang members. They seemed to part ways without any explanation. When there was no one left in sight, Quentin saw the brunette woman emerge from the darkness. Her blue eyes held so much remorse as she held a pistol in her shaky hands. Tears rolled down her red cheeks. I couldn't let him do it. It wasn't right," she cried. Quentin jumped up and snatched the gun out of the woman's hand. He knew this woman to be the sister of Tony. Martina Garza was the most beautiful woman. She had a gentle spirit and was strong in faith. He couldn't believe that a woman such as she could shoot her own brother point blank in in the head. Police sirens roared in the distance. "Let's go," said Quentin, grabbing Martina's hand. The two ran as fast as Quentin was able. Finally, they were able to seek shelter inside a church. Quentin sat at the first set of pews. He was covered in blood and felt lightheaded. "We need to get you to a hospital," said Martina. Her voice was riddled with concern. "There's no time for that. There are others." Quentin stopped to take a breath. "Bad men who want," he breathed again, "the money." Quentin slumped further down the pews. Drips of blood soaked the beige cushion. "Don't you die on me!" cried Martina as fresh tears stained her cheeks. "Don't let them get the money," choked Quentin, as he shut his eyes and grew unresponsive. "No! Wake up, Quentin! Wake up!" she screamed. "No, no, no," she muttered continuously, with her face buried on his shoulder. She was sobbing so profusely now that it hurt her to breathe. Someone had heard her screams and had come to see. They were a few feet behind her now. She didn't look to see who it was, even after she heard the man behind her gasp. "My God!" The man reached out and checked for a pulse on Quentin's unbloodied hand. The pulse was faint, but it was there. "We must get this man to a hospital." Martina looked up at the man through blurry, bloodshot eyes. She could tell he was wearing a black suit, and she knew he must be the reverend of the church. The man didn't wait for her to say anything. He ran to call the police. Martina knew at once that it was over. She would spend the rest of her life in prison or worse. There was just no way any of this could have a happy ending. Moments that felt like hours passed. The Reverend returned to say a prayer over Quentin. Silence crept closer to them. Martina grabbed the Reverend's hand and whispered, "Father, forgive me." The Reverend seemed to look puzzled at her. She told him, "I shot someone tonight." The blood seemed to drain from the Reverend's face. Minutes later, paramedics burst into the church. They checked Quentin's pulse and applied pressure to his wounds. He was still bleeding profusely as they loaded him onto the ambulance. Martina jumped in with Quentin, and the ambulance sped away. At the hospital, Martina watched as doctors rushed Quentin to the ICU. There were no guarantees that he was going to live, but then again, there was never any guarantees in life. Martina made a promise to Quentin. She would never tell anyone the truth of what happened, nor would she reveal what the money was, even if she had to give her life to protect the secret. When Quentin awoke, Martina was gone, and he was surrounded by a barrage of flowery wallpaper. His recollection was shaky. Two police officers walked into the room. Quentin knew what that meant. He would be going to prison, probably for the rest of his life. At least, he would be protected, and no one would find the money. "Quentin Mallard?" inquired one of the cops, whose name tag read Marlin. Quentin nodded. "Given your criminal background, I'd be very careful if I were you," said Granger, the other cop. "If you two are here to arrest me, then get it over with," he said. "We caught our man. Well, woman," said Marlin. Quentin's eyes grew wide. "You mean—" "Leave her alone. She has nothing to do with last night's events. Maybe you'd like to go downtown in a few days and clear her name. As of right now, she's confessed to everything," said Granger. "Everything?" Quentin asked. "Is there something you want to tell us?" said Granger. "Hold on, you guys still don't know where the money is. That's why you're here. We've been following you for some time, Mallard. We know you planned that heist, and we know you know where the money is," confessed Officer Marlin. "I ain't telling you shit. You want to arrest me? Fine. Martina's innocent, so let her go. This was all my idea. I planned everything, and I'm the one who shot Tony. That's the real truth." "You don't want to make this mistake, Mallard. We can make your life a living hell. Just tell us where the money is, and we'll release your girlfriend and let you walk free," said Marlin. "My life is already a living hell. I stand by my statement. Both of you can eat dirt and drop dead," said Quentin. Officer Marlin slapped a pair of handcuffs on Quentin's wrist and cuffed him to the hospital bed. "Watch him," ordered Marlin to Granger. Quentin watched the bold-faced clock on the wall. Slowly it ticked away. 3 hours passed. Then Martina walked through the door. Her eyes were wide and filled with sorrow. She ran to his bedside and threw her arms around him. "That's right, give him a hug, 'cause that will be your last hug," remarked Granger. "Can we have a minute?" asked Martina in a harsh tone. Reluctantly, Officer Granger obliged. Now that they were alone, Quentin grabbed Martina's arm with the hand that was not cuffed. He drew her as close to him as he could manage. She was now close enough that to an outsider it appeared as if they were locking lips. In her ear, Quentin whispered, "Bunker 4, Code Ace, 32, 17, 12, 45, at latitude 35, longitude 149. Martina's eyes widened. "You had it shipped overseas," she whispered back. He nodded and let her go. "How?" she asked. "I knew Tony would double-cross me. I could tell by the way he acted over recent days. I arranged to have the money shipped overseas to an Australian friend of mine. He has a secret bunker, one of those apocalyptic panic rooms. It's filled with expensive diamonds and such. When you go, tell him I sent you." Martina smiled. "Take this to my grave. Thank you for everything you have done," she said. Martina kissed Quentin on the forehead and swiftly left the room.